I thought losing my daughter was the end of my heart, but the real heartbreak began the day I lied to the man she loved most. The morning light fell across the old piano like a fragile promise. Dust drifted in the sunbeams, the room still holding her laughter in invisible corners. Evelyn Hart sat at the edge of the sofa, her wrinkled hands folded over a teacup gone cold. She had been staring at the same chipped mug for 15 minutes, unable to take a sip. The tea was long past drinkable, but she couldn't bear to empty it. Somehow, the small act of keeping it felt like keeping her daughter close. The house was too quiet now. Even the walls seemed to hum with absence. Hey there, my dear family and friends. If you're already tuned in and ready to enjoy this story, hit that subscribe button, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because tomorrow I'll be bringing you another story just as captivating, and you definitely don't want to miss it. Now back to the story. On the mantel, a framed photograph showed a smiling woman with brown hair and bright, stubborn eyes. Lena, her daughter. Next to her stood Daniel, his arm around her, both of them glowing with a kind of easy love Evelyn never learned to express. It had been 2 years since Lena's accident. 2 years since the late-night call, the rain, the sterile smell of the hospital. Evelyn still woke some nights hearing phantom footsteps in the hallway and her daughter's laughter fading down the stairs. She rose stiffly and moved toward the piano. Her fingertips brushed the ivory keys. Lena used to play Chopin on Sunday mornings, soft and slow. Evelyn pressed a single note. A minor. The sound wavered, cracked, and faded. She turned away quickly, her chest tightening. From the kitchen came the faint ticking of the clock. 17 a.m. time kept moving. She hadn't. Evelyn walked to her writing desk. Bills lay stacked neatly beside unopened letters. One envelope caught her eye. It was addressed in clean handwriting. Daniel Brooks, care of Morning Star Auto Repair. She had written it weeks ago, a short note offering help, maybe a few kind words. But she had never mailed it. The thought of reaching out to him, of hearing his voice again, made her stomach twist. He hadn't called her since the funeral. She didn't blame him. Still, she thought of him often. The boy who had become a man too fast. The man who had lost everything too soon. Her phone buzzed on the table, startling her. A message from Mrs. Levine, her neighbor. Evie just saw Daniel Brooks down by the grocery store. He's looking rough, poor thing. Lost his apartment, I think. Evelyn's hand froze on the screen. A tremor ran through her. Lost his apartment. She set the phone down gently. Walked to the window. The garden outside was overgrown, wild. Lena used to spend hours pruning the roses. Daniel would kneel beside her, laughing as she scolded him for cutting too deep. Evelyn remembered that sound, their laughter. She had loved it more than she ever said. Now the silence pressed against her like punishment. She opened the drawer beneath her writing desk. Inside were papers she had promised herself never to touch again. The will, the deeds, the car title. All in her name now. All left by her daughter. Just until he's stable, she whispered to herself. That was what she had told the lawyer. That was what she had told her reflection every morning since. But Daniel never seemed to stabilize. Each time she thought of giving him what Lena left him, the house, the car, the savings, she imagined him spiraling again, drowning in grief and debt. He wasn't ready. That was the lie she repeated until it sounded like truth. The phone buzzed again. Another message. He's at the shelter now, Evie. Lost his job too. Her breath caught. Something broke open in her chest, an ache deep and raw. She sank into the chair and covered her face with trembling hands. Oh, Lena, she whispered. What have I done? Outside, the wind stirred the trees. Across town, Daniel Brooks scrubbed grease from his hands at the sink of a rundown repair shop. His reflection in the cracked mirror barely looked human. Eyes sunken, stubble uneven, a man hollowed out by too many sleepless nights. The boss had just let him go. Too many mistakes, the man had said gently. Daniel couldn't argue. His head wasn't in it anymore. Hasn't been for years. He walked outside, jacket collar pulled tight against the autumn wind. His car, a rusted sedan that coughed every time it started, sat crooked against the curb. He opened the door and sat inside, the seat cold beneath him. The glove box still held a small tin box. Inside it were the wedding rings. He had kept hers, though he told himself he wouldn't. He turned it in his fingers, feeling its familiar weight. 2 years, he muttered. His voice cracked. He leaned back and shut his eyes, but all he could see was her face. Lena laughing under the rain. Lena saying, "You're too hard on yourself, Danny." Lena dying before he could say goodbye. He slammed his palm against the steering wheel and let the tears come. Back in her quiet house, Evelyn watched the rain begin to fall. She reached for the phone again. Her finger hovered over Daniel's name. She imagined his voice, low, tired, wary. She imagined the silence that would follow. Her heart pounded. Finally she pressed call. The dial tone echoed through the room. 1 ring. 3. Then, hello. His voice, rough, distant, pulled the air from her lungs. "Daniel," she whispered. Silence. Then a sigh. "Mrs. Hart." It had been so long since she'd heard him say her name. I heard you might be in some trouble," she said softly. "Maybe I could help." He chuckled bitterly. "Help? I don't think anyone can." She swallowed. "I still have the house, Daniel. Needs work. The fence is falling apart. If you're not too busy, I could." He cut her off. "You want to pay me to fix your fence?" Evelyn closed her eyes. "No, I thought maybe it would help. To do something. For both of us." Silence stretched between them like a tightrope. Finally he said quietly, "All right, I'll come by tomorrow." And then the line went dead. Evelyn stood there, the phone still pressed to her ear, her pulse trembling beneath her skin. For the first time in years she felt something shift inside her, something like hope or maybe fear. She wasn't sure which. She looked toward the photo of her daughter on the mantel and whispered, "Maybe this is how I start to make things right." Do you think Evelyn was right to keep the inheritance hidden, believing it was for Daniel's own good? Or was it a betrayal disguised as love? Share your thoughts below. I want to hear your heart. The next morning arrived gray and unwelcoming, the kind of morning that made the world feel smaller. The rain had stopped, but the clouds hung low, thick with unshed tears. Evelyn moved through the kitchen with deliberate care, her hands slightly trembling as she brewed coffee. She hadn't slept. Every hour of the night, her mind replayed Daniel's voice. Tired, distant, but alive. Now he was coming. The thought made her pulse unsteady. She set 2 mugs on the counter, then frowned, removing one. Felt presumptuous, too intimate. She replaced it, then removed it again. The small act symbolized everything between them, the push and pull of love and guilt, the hesitation between comfort and distance. When the knock came, it was soft but firm. Evelyn froze mid-breath. For a moment, she considered not answering. Pretend she wasn't home. Let the ghosts stay where they belonged. But then, through the glass, she saw his outline. Shoulders slouched, head slightly bowed, a man weathered by too much loss. She opened the door. "Daniel," she said quietly. He nodded once. "Mrs. Hart." For a long moment, neither moved. The air between them was thick with everything they didn't know how to say. Finally, she stepped aside, and he entered. The smell of old books and lavender hung in the air. His eyes traveled across the living room. The photos, the piano, the couch where Lena once napped with a blanket over her feet. "It's the same," he murmured. Evelyn's voice softened. "I haven't changed much." He gave a small nod, as though grateful and resentful all at once. "It's like she's still here." Evelyn swallowed hard. "Sometimes I pretend she is." The words slipped out before she could stop them. A heavy silence followed. They stepped out into the yard where the wooden fence sagged under years of neglect. The air smelled of wet earth and pine. Daniel ran a hand along the cracked boards. "She used to paint this," he said, almost to himself. "Wouldn't let me help." Evelyn smiled faintly. She wanted it perfect. He gave a quiet chuckle. She always did. For a few seconds, it almost felt like remembering didn't hurt. But then, as if realizing that peace was forbidden, Daniel's tone hardened. So, what made you call me after all this time? Evelyn's throat tightened. She turned her gaze toward the garden. I just thought you might need the work. That's all. He studied her face, his eyes narrowing slightly. You could have called anyone to fix this fence. Why me? She hesitated. Because it's your fence too. His expression shifted, a flicker of emotion crossing his face before he quickly looked away. Not anymore, Mrs. Hart. He got to work in silence. The sound of the hammer striking nails echoed through the quiet yard, sharp and rhythmic. Evelyn watched from the porch, holding a mug of untouched coffee. Each strike of the hammer felt like a heartbeat, strong, angry, alive. For the first time in years, the house sounded like it had life again. When he finally stopped to rest, she offered him the mug. He hesitated before taking it. Thank you, he said. You still take it black. He looked surprised. You remember. Evelyn smiled faintly. Mothers remember more than you think. He took a sip. The silence stretched again, not cold this time but tentative. After a long pause he said quietly, You know, I used to think she'd be mad at me for moving on. Evelyn's gaze softened. And did you? He gave a small shake of his head. No, I never did. She wanted to tell him she understood. That she hadn't moved on either. But the words caught in her throat. Instead she asked, Do you still dream about her? His voice grew low. Every night. The answer hit her like a prayer she didn't deserve to hear. As the day waned, Daniel packed up his tools. He turned to her, wiping his hands on a rag. I'll come back tomorrow. The whole fence will need replacing. Whatever it takes, she replied softly. He gave a small nod and started toward his car. Before he reached it, he paused, glancing back at the house. His gaze lingered on the piano through the window. She used to play that song, he said. The one about rain. Evelyn nodded. Prelude number 15. Raindrop. Yeah. He smiled faintly. She said it sounded like hope. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. She said the same thing to me. Their eyes met, two souls tethered by the same ghost. See you tomorrow, Mrs. Hart, he murmured. As his car disappeared down the street, Evelyn remained on the porch, the soft wind brushing her gray hair. She could still hear the faint rhythm of his hammer, echoing in her mind like a heartbeat long silenced. Inside, the house felt different, warmer, alive. She walked to the piano again and pressed a single key. The note lingered in the air, fragile, uncertain but beautiful. She whispered to the empty room. He's still trying, Lena. Maybe now I can too. And for the first time in 2 years, Evelyn let herself smile through her tears. Do you believe reconnecting with someone who shares your grief can help you heal? Or only reopen the wounds? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious what you think. The next few days passed in a rhythm neither Evelyn nor Daniel spoke about. He came each morning just after 9, toolbox in hand, eyes tired but determined. She always had coffee ready, though he rarely drank it until it went cold. Their conversations stayed light. Weather, wood prices, the stubbornness of nails. But beneath every word, silence lived like a shadow. Evelyn watched him from the kitchen window as he worked on the fence. Each swing of his hammer echoed through her chest. Sometimes he would pause, leaning on the post, staring at the garden as though listening for something she couldn't hear. Once, she caught him glancing toward the bedroom window, Lena's old room. That look nearly shattered her. On the third day, she brought him a plate of sandwiches. He wiped his hands and nodded his thanks, sitting on the porch step. You always made these for her, he said quietly. Turkey and mustard. She said no one did it like you. Evelyn sat beside him. She used to ask for them every Sunday after church. Even when she was grown. Daniel smiled faintly. Yeah. She said they tasted like home. Evelyn's throat tightened. She said that. He nodded, eyes on the yard. She missed you, you know. More than she ever said. Evelyn's breath faltered. I missed her too. I never knew how to say things right. Daniel looked at her for the first time in days. Neither did I. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the space between them felt almost safe. But then something flickered behind his gaze. Suspicion, pain, and he looked away. Did the insurance ever come through? He asked suddenly. The question hit her like a slap. Her fingers tightened around her cup. Insurance? He shrugged, his tone casual but too measured. Yeah. The life insurance. Or the will. I mean, she had a plan for everything. You know how she was. Evelyn forced a smile, her voice barely steady. It was complicated. Lawyers' paperwork. You know how slow those things can be. Daniel nodded, though the look in his eyes said he didn't believe her. Right. Complicated. The silence that followed was suffocating. He set down his plate and stood, brushing off his hands. I should finish the west side before it gets dark. Evelyn nodded, staring at the untouched sandwich. Yes, of course. She watched him walk away, the distance between them suddenly wider than it had ever been. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. The wind tapped against the window, carrying whispers of her conscience. She rose, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders, and walked to the drawer where the papers were kept. The will, a deed, the car title, all signed in her name, all meant for him. She had convinced herself she was protecting him. But seeing his eyes today, that flicker of doubt, it didn't feel like protection anymore. Felt like theft. She sat at the table, the papers spread before her like confessions. In the quiet, her daughter's voice echoed faintly in memory. Mom, promise me you'll look after him. He's got a kind heart. Just needs someone to believe in him. I did look after him, she whispered, her voice breaking. Didn't I? But the question hung unanswered in the empty room. The next morning, Daniel arrived earlier than usual. He didn't knock, just started working. The air was heavy with unspoken words. Evelyn stepped out with his coffee, trying to smile. You're early. He nodded curtly. Couldn't sleep. He kept hammering, the strikes faster, louder, as though driving something deeper than nails. Evelyn watched him in silence until she couldn't bear it anymore. You don't have to do this if it's too much, she said softly. I didn't mean to stir up old memories. He didn't look up. It's not the memories that bother me. Her voice trembled. Then what is it? He paused mid-swing, jaw tightening. It's the silence, Mrs. Hart. It's like this house is full of it, and I can't tell what it's hiding. The words hung between them like smoke. Evelyn's heart pounded. I've just been trying to keep things peaceful. He finally turned to her, eyes burning with something raw. Peaceful for who? She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came. His stare softened almost immediately, guilt flashing across his face. I'm sorry, he muttered. I shouldn't have said that. Evelyn took a step closer. No, Daniel, you're right. This house is full of silence. I suppose we both put it there. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time she saw the man her daughter had loved. The grief carved deep, but beneath it, kindness waiting to be seen. Still, the moment couldn't hold. He picked up his tools. I'll finish by tomorrow, he said, his voice low. Then I'll be out of your way. She wanted to stop him, to tell him everything, the will, the house, the truth. But the fear was louder. Fear that if she confessed, she would lose the only piece of her daughter she had left. So she said nothing. And that silence, heavy and alive, followed them both long after Daniel drove away. That night, Evelyn sat by the piano again. She pressed a single key, G minor. The note wavered, hollow. Lena, she whispered, I don't know how to fix what I broke. Her reflection in the dark window looked like a stranger. She didn't know that across town, Daniel sat in his car with a bottle he hadn't opened yet, staring at the same night sky, whispering almost the same words. I don't know how to let go. When people keep secrets to protect others, do you think it ever truly protects, or only delays the pain? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your heart on this one. The day the storm came, the air felt restless from morning on. Heavy clouds pressing down as though the sky itself carried a secret it couldn't hold anymore. Evelyn stood on the porch, watching the wind move through the trees, bending the branches with impatient hands. Daniel's truck pulled into the driveway just as the first droplets began to fall. "You sure this is a good idea?" he called out, climbing from the cab with his jacket pulled tight. "They said it's supposed to be a bad one." Evelyn smiled faintly. "You know me. I never did listen to forecasts." He laughed under his breath and grabbed his toolbox. "All right then, stubbornness runs in the family." The word family hung in the air between them, softer than thunder but louder than either could ignore. They worked side by side for an hour, the rain starting as a drizzle, then turning to a steady curtain of water. Evelyn held the umbrella while Daniel secured the last board of the new fence. Each crack of his hammer echoed through the storm like a heartbeat trying to stay steady. Lightning flashed, followed almost instantly by thunder. The wind picked up, scattering tools across the yard. Daniel wiped rain from his face. "We should call it a day." "I'll make some tea," Evelyn shouted back. "Come inside before you drown." By the time he stepped into the house, both were drenched. Evelyn hurried to fetch towels, but Daniel stopped her with a chuckle. "It's all right. I'm used to storms." She handed him a towel anyway. "You don't get used to being cold." As she spoke, the lights flickered once, then went out. Darkness filled the room. The only light came from the lightning flashing outside, brief and ghostly. "Well," she said quietly, "looks like we're staying in for a while." He looked around uneasy. "I can go if it's a problem." "Daniel," she said gently, "the roads will flood. You're safer here." He hesitated then nodded. "All right." Evelyn lit a few candles and set them on the dining table. Their glow softened the lines in both their faces. Daniel sat, rubbing his hands together for warmth. "I can't remember the last time I sat through a storm without the TV on," he said with a small smile. "Maybe that's a good thing," she replied. "Silence can be honest." He tilted his head. "Or dangerous." Evelyn looked at him across the candlelight. "Depends what we're hiding from." The words came out before she could stop them, and his eyes met hers, sharp, searching. "I'm not hiding," he said. "I wasn't talking about you," she whispered. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough." The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. Evelyn went to the kitchen, returning with a pot of soup. Daniel helped her carry it to the table, the two of them moving in quiet sync. When he took his first spoonful, he smiled faintly. "She used to make this." Evelyn's chest tightened. "She learned it from me." "Then you taught her well." The way he said it, gentle, sincere, caught her off guard. It had been so long since anyone had spoken kindness to her without pity. "She was proud of you," Daniel said after a moment. "Even when you didn't see it. She told me once that everything good she had came from you." Evelyn looked down at her hands, blinking back tears. "She said that." "Yeah." His voice softened. "You gave her roots. I tried to give her wings." The words settled between them, tender and true. Evelyn smiled through trembling lips. She needed both. They sat in silence for a while, the storm raging outside but the air between them calm for once. Then, in the middle of their fragile peace, a picture frame fell from the mantel, crashing against the floor. Evelyn flinched. Daniel rose, picking it up gently. The glass was cracked across the image, Lena's smiling face between the two of them on her wedding day. He brushed the shards aside carefully. "Seems she's still trying to get our attention," he said with a half-smile. Evelyn laughed softly, a sound more like a sigh. She always did know how to make an entrance. For the first time since she'd buried her daughter, Evelyn laughed without guilt. Later, when the storm quieted to a whisper, They found themselves sitting in the living room, two candles flickering on the table between them. Daniel stared into the flame. "I used to think she'd walk through that door again," he said quietly. "Some nights, I still look for her headlights." Evelyn nodded. "I do the same. Every morning I half expect her to call." Their eyes met. The rawness between them felt unbearable yet sacred. "She wouldn't want this," Daniel whispered. "Us being strangers." Evelyn swallowed. "No, she wouldn't." Silence stretched, not empty this time, but full of everything they'd lost and everything they still shared. "You know," Daniel said, his voice barely above a breath, "I blamed you for a long time." Evelyn looked up slowly. "I know. I thought you resented me for surviving her." Her eyes glistened. "I didn't resent you, Daniel. Envied you. You had a part of her I never could." The confession landed like a prayer. He exhaled, eyes softening. "You loved her your way. I loved her mine. Maybe that's enough." Evelyn reached across the table, her hand trembling, and touched his. For a moment he didn't move. Then he turned his palm upward, holding hers. The thunder outside rolled like distant applause. Hours later the storm passed. The first hint of dawn crept across the sky. Daniel rose to leave. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For the soup. For this." Evelyn smiled faintly. "For what?" "For letting me remember her without falling apart." She nodded, her throat too tight for words. As he opened the door, a cool breeze swept in, clean, new, carrying the scent of wet earth and renewal. "See you tomorrow?" she asked. He hesitated, then smiled. "Yeah, tomorrow." And as his footsteps disappeared into the morning, Evelyn realized something had shifted. The silence in the house no longer felt punishing. It felt expectant, as if waiting for the truth to finally be spoken. The storm left behind a silence that was almost holy. Birds sang louder than usual that morning. The grass shimmered with dew. The world looked washed clean, except for Evelyn's heart, still muddied with guilt. She stood by the window watching Daniel arrive. He was early again, carrying his usual worn toolbox and that same gentle determination. Something in her chest ached, a strange mixture of pride and dread. He waved, and she forced a smile. "Morning," he said, stepping inside. "Looks like the fence survived the storm." "Thanks to you," she replied softly. "Coffee?" He nodded, settling into the chair by the window. "Please." "Black." Evelyn poured him a cup, trying to ignore how her hands trembled. She could barely look at him anymore. Every moment of kindness from him only sharpened the edge of her guilt. While she tidied the counter, Daniel looked around the house. His gaze fell on the piano, the wedding photo on the mantel, the paper she hadn't noticed still lying partially tucked beneath a tray on the sideboard. A corner of one page was visible, a name typed in bold at the top. He rose without thinking, his fingers brushing the paper. The words leapt out at him before he could look away. "Last Will and Testament of Lena Brooks." The coffee cup slipped slightly in Evelyn's hand, spilling a dark streak across the counter. "Daniel," she said quickly, "please don't." He turned to her, holding the paper. "You have this." She froze. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" His voice cracked with disbelief. "You told me the lawyers were still handling it." "They were," she said softly. I couldn't." He stepped closer, his breath unsteady. "You couldn't what, Evelyn?" She sank into a chair. "I couldn't let it go. Not yet." He stared at her, eyes narrowing. Her house, her car, her savings. All of it was supposed to go to me, wasn't it? Evelyn's silence was answer enough. The storm outside had been nothing compared to the one now breaking between them. Daniel dropped the papers onto the table. "Do you know what the last year's been like for me? I lost her, I lost my job, I lost everything. And you had it all this time." Tears welled in her eyes. "I wasn't trying to hurt you." "Then what was it? Punishment?" "No," she cried, standing suddenly. "It was Protection. I thought you were drowning, Daniel. You weren't eating, you were drinking, you wouldn't even answer the phone. I was afraid you'd throw it all away. He laughed bitterly. So you decided for me? Her hands shook. I was trying to keep something of her safe. He stared at her, voice trembling. You mean yourself. You were keeping your memory of her safe. The one where you still had a piece of her. Evelyn turned away, tears spilling freely. I know. You're right. He slammed his hand against the table. I didn't need your permission to grieve. I needed honesty. Her voice broke. And I needed my daughter. The words cracked through the room like thunder. Both froze, breathless. Evelyn sank back down, sobbing quietly. Every night I go to bed thinking I'll dream of her. And every morning I wake up to silence. I couldn't lose the last part of her I had, Daniel. So I kept it. I kept it all. Daniel's anger faltered, confusion and sorrow mixing behind his eyes. Do you think she'd have wanted this? He asked finally, his voice low. Do you think she'd want us turning her memory into a weapon? Evelyn shook her head slowly. No. But I don't know how to let go. They sat in silence for a long time. Rain began again outside. Soft, almost forgiving. Daniel finally stood, his jaw tight. You should have told me. We could have figured it out together. She nodded weakly. I was afraid you'd hate me. He exhaled shakily. Right now. I don't even know what I feel. He gathered his jacket, the papers still in his hand. Daniel, please, she whispered. Don't walk out like this. He looked at her, eyes full of the same heartbreak she'd seen the day of the funeral. You already shut the door on me, Evelyn. A year ago. And with that he left. That night, Evelyn sat alone at the table, the wind whistling through the cracks like whispers of judgment. Her hands trembled as she reached for the phone, scrolling through old messages from Lena. Screenshots of recipes, random "love you, mom" texts, voice notes she hadn't been able to delete. She pressed play on one. Lena's voice filled the kitchen, bright and alive. Mom, don't forget to tell Daniel about the will, okay? I don't want him worrying. Just make sure he knows I trusted him. Evelyn's sobs came in waves. I failed you, baby. I failed him. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in his truck down the road. The papers spread across the passenger seat. Rain streaked the windshield as lightning flashed once in the distance. He couldn't bring himself to start the engine. His wife's handwriting stared back at him from the signature line. Lena Hart Brooks. Under beneficiary. His own name. His breath caught. A line of text he hadn't noticed before glowed faintly under the lightning's reflection. In the event my husband is unable or unwilling to manage these assets, I entrust my mother to safeguard them. But always, always, return them to him when the time is right. He read it twice. Then a third time. Evelyn had been following her daughter's instructions all along, just trapped too long in the waiting. Daniel's anger began to crumble under the weight of that realization. He closed his eyes, whispering into the dark. When is the right time, Lena? And though no one answered, the rain outside seemed to soften, as if the world itself was telling him, when forgiveness becomes stronger than grief. Do you think there's ever a right time to tell the truth? Or does waiting only make love harder to find again? Share what you believe in the comments. I want to know your thoughts. The following days were thick with silence. Neither of them reached out. Evelyn stayed in the house, folding and refolding the same stack of linens, boiling water just to pour it down the drain. Every sound in the house seemed too loud now that Daniel wasn't there. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock counting every second of her regret. She thought about calling him a dozen times, even dialed his number twice. But guilt was a heavy thing. It chained her fingers and swallowed her courage. On the third morning, she decided she couldn't bear the walls anymore. She wrapped a scarf around her neck and stepped out into the gray light. The fence Daniel had built stood firm through the storm, smooth and solid. She ran her hand along the wood, feeling the steadiness of his work. It reminded her of him, the quiet strength beneath the hurt. At the grocery store, she turned down an aisle and froze. Daniel was there. He looked tired, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, but not angry. Just sat. Their eyes met, and for a long second neither spoke. Then he broke the silence. "Evelyn." She managed a weak smile. "Daniel." An awkward pause stretched between them, filled with everything they hadn't said. "How have you been?" he asked finally. She swallowed hard, trying to be brave, failing mostly. He gave a small, understanding nod. "Me too." Her voice wavered. "You read the rest of the will, didn't you?" He hesitated, then nodded again. "Yeah, I did." The weight of the moment softened a little. "I didn't know what to do," she confessed quietly. "Your name was there, but so was mine. It felt like she was asking me to hold on until I could trust you again, and I didn't know how." Daniel sighed, leaning against the cart. "You could have trusted me the way she did. But I get it now. Maybe we both lost our way." She blinked back tears. "I never wanted to be the villain in her story." He looked at her gently. "You're not. You're just a mom who didn't know how to stop missing her daughter." The words cracked something open in her. For the first time in months, Evelyn felt the weight in her chest loosen. They ended up walking to the cafe across the street, sitting in a corner booth they used to share with Lena. The waitress, the same one who used to serve them years ago, recognized them instantly and hesitated. "It's been a while," she said softly, setting down 2 cups of coffee. Evelyn smiled faintly. "Feels like a lifetime." Daniel stared out the window. "Maybe it's time we stopped pretending she's just gone." Evelyn turned to him. "What do you mean?" He rubbed his thumb along the rim of his cup. "I mean, maybe she's still here. In the fence. In the recipes. In this stupid coffee shop. Maybe she's not asking us to grieve her anymore. Maybe she's asking us to live for her." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. She would have liked that. "She would have laughed at us first," Daniel said with a smile. "Then told us to stop being dramatic." Evelyn laughed softly, her eyes glistening. "She always did have your humor. And your stubbornness," he added. They both smiled. A real, gentle smile that felt like forgiveness beginning to take root. Later that afternoon, they drove back to the house together. "I should fix the back gate," Daniel said. "Storm loosened the hinges." Evelyn nodded. "If you have time." "I've got time." As he worked, she brought him lemonade. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The air felt easier now, filled with quiet companionship instead of tension. She sat on the steps, watching him. "Daniel." He looked up. "I want to make it right. The house. Car. The account. All of it should have been yours." He set the hammer down. "Evelyn." "No, please," she interrupted, voice trembling but steady. "I've spent too long holding on to what was never mine to keep. I thought I was preserving her memory, but all I did was cage it. I want you to have it, as she intended." Daniel took a deep breath. "I don't want to take it from you. That house is filled with her, and with you. I'd rather we find a way to share it." "Share it?" He nodded. "Use it for something she'd be proud of. Maybe a small foundation in her name. Scholarships for young nurses. She always talked about that." Evelyn's breath caught. "She did." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe that's our way to make peace with her. Together." Her eyes filled again. "You'd do that? With me?" "Of course," he said softly. "We were both her family. We still are." As dusk settled, Daniel packed his tools and turned to leave. "Evelyn," he said quietly. "I know it'll take time. But I forgive you." Her hand flew to her mouth. "You do?" He nodded. "Because if I don't, I'll never heal. And I think she'd want both of us to." Tears rolled freely down her cheeks. She reached out, touching his arm. "You're a good man, Daniel." He smiled sadly. "Your daughter made me one." She watched him drive away, the sound of the truck fading down the long road. For the first time in months, Evelyn didn't feel alone. She felt something rebuilding inside her. Not the old kind of love that clings to what's gone, but the kind that lets it live through something new. That night, Evelyn sat at the piano again. This time when she pressed a key, it wasn't the mournful G minor, but a soft C major, hopeful light. The melody filled the house like a quiet promise. And in that moment, she could almost hear her daughter's laughter echoing faintly in the walls. When forgiveness finally enters the room, do you think it can rebuild what grief once destroyed, or is it always something new entirely? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to know how you see it. For a few short weeks, peace settled between them like spring sunlight after a long winter. Evelyn and Daniel met every Thursday to plan the Lena Hart Foundation. They gathered papers, met with the local community center, even drafted scholarship outlines together. For the first time in over a year, laughter returned to the house. Gentle, fragile, but real. When Daniel smiled now, it didn't look like a man surviving grief. It looked like one learning how to live again. And when Evelyn smiled, it no longer trembled at the corners. But healing has a way of testing itself. It began with a visit. One afternoon, as Evelyn was baking a batch of Lena's favorite cinnamon rolls for their meeting, the doorbell rang. She wiped her hands on her apron and opened the door. A woman stood there, early 30s, wearing a hospital badge and carrying a small folder. Her name tag read, Rachel Dunn, Social Services. Mrs. Hart? She asked gently. I'm sorry to intrude. I'm here about the property transfer. Evelyn's stomach dropped. The property what? The deed for 418 Willow Lane, Rachel said. It seems there's a discrepancy. Your late daughter's estate listed your son-in-law as primary beneficiary, but the legal ownership was never officially transferred. Evelyn's breath caught. I thought that was handled. Rachel frowned sympathetically. It looks like the title's still in your name. I've been asked to confirm whether you intend to sign over ownership. Before Evelyn could respond, a car pulled into the driveway. Daniel. He saw the woman at the door and approached slowly. Everything okay? Rachel turned. You must be Mr. Brooks. I was just explaining the property issue. Daniel's expression shifted. Property issue. Rachel glanced between them, uncomfortable. I'll give you both a moment, she said, stepping aside. Evelyn's hands trembled as she shut the door. Daniel, I swear I didn't know she was coming. He stared at her. You haven't signed the house over yet? I was going to. When? His voice was sharp, a tone she hadn't heard in weeks. After another few months of peace. After you found one more reason to keep it. Her eyes filled with panic. No, Daniel. I just needed time to. Time for what, Evelyn? He cut in. You said you wanted to make it right. I do want to make it right, she pleaded. But that house, it's all I have left of her. Daniel's voice cracked. It's all I have left too. The room went quiet except for the ticking of the kitchen clock. Evelyn's shoulders slumped. I thought we were healing. So did I, he said, his voice low. But healing means trust. And I guess we're not there yet. He grabbed his jacket, eyes glistening. I can't do this again. Thinking we're mending something only to find another secret underneath. Daniel, please. But he was already out the door. Evelyn sank into the nearest chair, her hands gripping the edge of the table. The cinnamon rolls burned in the oven, smoke curling like ghostly fingers around her grief. She didn't notice until the alarm shrieked, snapping her out of her trance. She pulled them out, charred and ruined. The smell of sugar and ashes filled the house. She stared at them for a long moment, then whispered to the empty kitchen. I break everything I touch. That night, Daniel sat in his truck again, parked outside the house but unable to go in. He stared at the porch light she'd left on for him, flickering softly through the rain. He wanted to forgive her again. But forgiveness felt like a door that only opened toward her and never toward him. He opened the glove compartment and pulled out the folder containing Lena's will. He'd kept it with him like a talisman or curse. As he turned the pages, he found a note he hadn't seen before. folded between the last two sheets. It was handwritten on pale blue stationery. His wife's handwriting. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Please don't hold on too tight. Daniel's a good man, even when he's lost. Give him the house. He'll fill it with life again, and that's how I'll stay close to both of you. Love always, Lena." Daniel's breath caught. His hand shook. He looked back at the house glowing faintly through the rain. His reflection faint in the windshield. "She told you exactly what to do," he whispered. "And you still couldn't let go." His heart twisted, not in anger but in something worse, disappointment. Evelyn spent the night on the couch, wrapped in one of Lena's old blankets. She couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house sounded like footsteps that never arrived. At dawn, she wrote a letter. Her hand trembled the whole time. "Daniel, you were right. I said I wanted to make things right, but I was still clutching the past with both hands. The truth is, I don't know how to live without the pain. It's become my way of remembering her. But I don't want to trap her memory anymore. Or yours. The deed will be signed today. The house is yours. I only ask one thing. Don't let it become a monument to what we lost. Let it be a home again. With love, Evelyn." She folded it neatly and left it on the kitchen counter with the papers. By evening, she drove to the notary's office and signed everything over. Her signature trembled at the end, a tiny fracture of a long-held grief finally released. When she returned home, Daniel's truck was gone. The porch light still flickered. She stepped inside and looked around. The house felt lighter somehow, emptier, yes, but peaceful, like it was finally breathing again. She whispered into the quiet, "It's done, baby. It's finally done." Her reflection in the window smiled faintly through tears. But somewhere deep inside, a new kind of fear took root, the fear that letting go might mean being forgotten. When love forces us to choose between holding on and letting go, which do you think takes more courage? I'd love to hear your heart in the comments below. The house was silent again, that deep, echoing silence Evelyn once feared and now accepted as penance. Days passed. She moved through them like a ghost, making tea she didn't drink, sitting by the window long after sunset. The papers were gone, the deed transferred, the car title mailed. Every piece of her daughter's legacy now belonged to Daniel, as it always should have. But the relief she expected never came. Only emptiness. She told herself this was what peace must feel like. Quiet, still, hollow, but deep down she knew better. Peace without connection was just another kind of grief. Across town, Daniel wasn't sleeping either. The new deed sat on his kitchen table, untouched for days. The envelope was open, but he couldn't bring himself to pick it up. Every time he tried, he heard Evelyn's trembling voice. "I only ask one thing. Don't let it become a monument to what we lost." He had thought that taking ownership would bring closure. Instead, it only deepened the ache. He walked through the house that night, looking at the photos still unpacked, the walls still bare. Didn't feel like home. It felt like a shrine to a love frozen in time. He poured himself a drink, then set it down untouched. Lena's words from her letter echoed in his head. Give him the house. He'll fill it with life again. But he couldn't, not alone. He thought of Evelyn, her shaking hands, her guilt, her eyes that looked too much like Lena's when she cried. For months, he had blamed her for holding on. Now he wondered if he'd ever really let go himself. He turned off the lights and sat in the dark, whispering into the silence. I miss her, Evelyn. And I miss you too. Evelyn spent the next morning tending the garden. It had been months since she'd touched it. The roses her daughter had planted were struggling, leaves brittle from neglect. She knelt in the soil, whispering, I'm sorry, sweetheart. I lost the courage to take care of what you loved. As she pruned the stems, a voice startled her from behind. You always did talk to plants. Evelyn turned. Daniel stood by the gate, sunlight at his back, looking uncertain but softer than before. Her heart leapt. Daniel! He smiled faintly. I came to bring you something. She wiped her hands on her apron. You didn't have to. I know, he said. But I wanted to. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a single page. A deed of transfer. Her eyes widened. Daniel, what? He interrupted gently. I signed half the house back to you. We're co-owners now. She shook her head. No, Daniel, I can't. Yes, you can, he said firmly. You said you wanted it to be a home again. So let's make it one, together. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. After everything I did, you still trust me. He took a deep breath. Trust isn't something you have or don't. Something you rebuild. One truth at a time. They sat on the porch steps, the same place where they'd once eaten sandwiches, once yelled, once forgiven. The air felt heavy with possibility. I've been thinking, Daniel said after a while, about what Lena would have wanted. She didn't want us living in memories. She wanted us to live. Evelyn smiled softly. You sound just like her. He chuckled. She always said I talked too much. Evelyn looked at him, eyes shimmering. She loved that about you. They both laughed quietly. And for a moment, the grief between them didn't feel like an ocean anymore. Felt like a bridge. As dusk settled, they walked through the house together. Daniel pointed to a faded photo of Lena on the wall. I was thinking we could turn this room into an office for the foundation. Keep her picture here. Make it a space for hope, not sorrow. Evelyn nodded, her voice trembling. I'd like that. They paused in front of the piano. Evelyn hesitated, then sat. You haven't played in a while, Daniel said gently. I was waiting, she whispered. Didn't know what for. Play, he said softly. For her. Her fingers touched the keys, hesitant at first, then stronger. The melody was the same one she'd played the day before her daughter's funeral, but this time it sounded different. Not a lament but a conversation. Daniel stood behind her, listening, eyes closed. When the last note faded, he whispered, You brought her back, just for a minute. Evelyn turned, smiling through tears. No, Daniel. You did. They sat there for a long while, surrounded by silence that finally felt kind. Then Daniel spoke, his voice low. You know, for the first time since she died, I don't feel like I'm drowning. Evelyn nodded. That's because we stopped fighting the current. He looked at her, something unspoken passing between them. Not romance, not exactly, but a deep, quiet understanding. The kind of love that comes when two broken hearts decide to keep beating side by side. When Daniel left that evening, the air smelled of lilacs and fresh soil. See you tomorrow, he asked, hand on the doorknob. Evelyn smiled. Tomorrow. As he walked away, she watched him through the window. Not with fear this time, but gratitude. The kind that makes forgiveness bloom into something living. She whispered softly to the night. Thank you, baby. You've done your work. Sometimes forgiveness is a door that opens in both directions. One for them and one for us. Do you believe love after loss can truly heal what was broken? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your heart. Spring came slowly that year, like a promise the world was afraid to make too soon. The willow trees outside the house had begun to bud again, their pale green fingers stretching toward the light. The same light poured through the newly washed windows, landing on freshly painted walls, on open boxes filled with books and photographs, and on the piano that no longer sat in silence. The Lena Hart Foundation was officially launching that week. Evelyn stood at the kitchen counter, tying ribbons around the small envelopes that held thank you cards for the donors. Each one bore her daughter's name in soft gold lettering. The house hummed with life again, the kind of life Lena would have adored. Daniel arrived carrying a tray of coffee and muffins. You're supposed to let the volunteers handle this, he teased. Evelyn smirked. Volunteers don't know how to tie a proper ribbon. He chuckled, setting the tray down. Control freak. She raised an eyebrow. Who taught me that? They shared a laugh. The easy, familiar kind that fills a room with warmth. It still astonished Evelyn sometimes. The way grief had softened between them. It hadn't disappeared, it never would, but it had transformed. It no longer chained them to the past. It reminded them of why they'd survived. As the first guests arrived for the small community event, Evelyn stepped outside. The garden was in full bloom again. The roses had come back stronger than ever. She could almost hear her daughter's laughter among the petals. She caught Daniel watching her from the porch, his expression peaceful. "She'd be proud," he said quietly. Evelyn nodded, voice thick with emotion. "So would your mother." He smiled. "Funny, isn't it? We both lost our anchors, and somehow found new ground in each other." Evelyn took a deep breath. "We didn't find new ground, Daniel. We built it." Inside, the guests mingled. Local teachers, families, volunteers, and a few young women who had applied for the first scholarship. Evelyn recognized one of them. A shy girl named Marissa who reminded her so much of Lena it made her chest ache. Marissa approached hesitantly. "Mrs. Hart, I just wanted to say thank you. I read about your daughter. I hope I can make her proud." Evelyn reached for her hand. "You already have." As the girl walked away, Daniel whispered, "You handled that beautifully." Evelyn smiled faintly. "It's easier when I feel her here." He looked around the house, at the flowers, the photographs, the gentle hum of conversation. "She's everywhere." Later that evening, after the last guest had left, they sat together on the porch. The air was still, carrying the faint hum of crickets. Daniel took a sip of coffee. "You know," he said slowly, "when I first moved back into this house, I couldn't breathe. It felt like every corner whispered her name. But now," he glanced around, "now it feels like she's at peace." Evelyn's eyes softened. "Because we are." He turned to her. "Do you ever think about what she'd say if she saw us now?" Evelyn smiled through tears. "She'd probably roll her eyes and say, 'Finally.'" They laughed, the kind of laughter that releases something deep and old. After a while, Daniel stood. "I have something for you." He disappeared inside and returned with a small wooden box. "Found this while organizing the attic. I think she meant it for you." Evelyn opened it slowly. Inside was a simple locket, gold worn with a small inscription on the back, "Keep the light." When she opened it, she found two pictures, one of Lena as a child and one of Daniel and Lena on their wedding day. Tucked behind them was a folded piece of paper. Evelyn unfolded it, her breath catching as she recognized her daughter's handwriting again. "If life ever feels too heavy, remember. Love doesn't end, it just changes form. You taught me that, even when you didn't believe it yourself. Keep the light for me, okay? And when Daniel's ready, help him find it too. Love you always, Elle." Evelyn pressed the letter to her chest, tears spilling freely. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice quiet. "She really did know us better than we knew ourselves." Evelyn nodded, voice trembling. "She always did." That night, when Daniel left, Evelyn stayed on the porch. She looked up at the stars, brighter than she'd seen them in years. She whispered into the night, "I kept your light, baby. And I shared it just like you asked." A breeze moved through the garden, rustling the roses. Somewhere in her soul, she felt Lena's presence, not as a memory, but as something living, eternal. Weeks later, the foundation began receiving letters from scholarship recipients. Stories of hope, of change, of survival. Evelyn kept them all in a binder labeled, "Lena's Legacy." Daniel stopped by every morning now. Sometimes to fix a broken shelf, sometimes just to talk. Their bond had become a rhythm, steady and comforting. There were moments, over coffee, over laughter, over shared silence, when Evelyn realized that love had returned to the house. Not romantic love, but the rare kind that's born from shared pain, forgiveness, and faith that hearts can mend. One Sunday morning, as they finished planting new flowers in the front yard, Daniel looked up and said quietly, "You know, I think she brought us together for this." Evelyn brushed soil from her hands. "What do you mean?" "She knew you'd keep everything," he said with a small smile. "And she knew I'd need someone who loved her enough to fight me for it." Evelyn laughed softly. "That sounds like her." Daniel nodded. "Yeah. But I think what she really wanted was for us to stop surviving her and start living for her. Evelyn looked at the blooming roses, sunlight dancing across their petals. Then we're finally doing it right. That evening, Evelyn sat alone at the piano. She played the same melody she had once played through tears, but this time she played it with peace. The final note lingered like a breath held and then released. As it faded, Daniel appeared in the doorway. "You still got it," he said softly. She smiled. "Some songs don't leave you. They just wait until you're ready to play them again." The night settled softly around the house that once held so much sorrow. Now it held laughter, forgiveness, and memory, woven together like threads of gold. Evelyn closed her eyes, whispering, "We kept the light, Lena. And it's brighter than ever." And for the first time in years, the house on Willow Lane didn't feel haunted, felt alive.
Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this video, and I'm confident you enjoyed it. We've got plenty more exciting and heartwarming stories waiting for you. Just click on the image on your screen to watch the next one.